What we're looking at here is the ashram built by Dr. Franklin Merrell-Wolff, located in the high Sierras, just west of the town of Lone Pine. Now, I'm going to zoom in so you can get a better look at it. You may not even be able to pick it up right now among the crags. So here we go. Now you can begin to see it. Standing here with me is Ed DeDeo, who is a student of Dr. Wolff's, and who's right now visiting up at Dr. Wolff's ranch, which is just down in the foothills below us. And he'll tell you a little bit about when and why it was built.
Okay, Joel. I am one of Dr. Wolff's younger students, and so I was not here when the ashrama was built in the 30s and in the 40s. Every summer, Dr. Wolff and some of his students would come up and begin some of the laborious work on the ashrama. It's situated at about 8,000 feet here in the highest part of the Sierra Nevada mountains. It took the people so long to build it because they only had about 3 months every summer when there was no snow and harsh weather to come up here and do their work.
In fact, I'm going to try and give you a shot of the path that we're climbing to get there. I don't know if it'll read in this light, but I'm going to move the camera now, so hold on. I don't know if you can make that path out because of the shadows, but anyway, this is the kind of terrain we're climbing, and we're going to go on up there and we'll talk some more. Okay, we're up here just below the ashrama, about 8,000 feet above sea level. And I've asked Ed to retrace the trail which we've been taking, which at times is pretty steep, so you can get an idea of it, and also the steps leading up to the actual structure. So I'm not going to be able to talk as I pan with him, so Ed, would you come on? This is Ed now. As I say, I don't want to fool you, he's retracing our steps. I'm also trying to follow focus to see how successful I am. These are the steps, the actual rock steps that were blasted out of the mountain along with the ashrama, which you now can see there. I hope that's focused right. Right against the Sierras. All stone and mortar. And we'll be moving up there right about now when we lock in. Now, right now we are looking at the town of Lone Pine in the Owens Valley, Ed?
Owens Valley.
The Owens Valley. And as you'll see in a moment, the mountains behind and trees right on our little perch. And over here, see the ashram. Perched right on the edge of this cliff. Those great Sierra crags in the background. Just gorgeous place up here. Moving? Okay, it's moving slowly? Oh, that's okay, it's recording. Alright, here's another view of the Owens Valley, right from next to the doorway to the ashram. We'll be going inside in a minute. I hope there's enough light to record there. Just to give you an idea of the perspective. Move up. Great slopes. And there it is. Deserted now. And run down. Is it going? Okay, now we're inside. I have a hand holding this. Give you some idea of the bare concrete walls, the open windows. How much of this is reading, I don't know. There's the shadows from the broken roof, which we'll see in a minute. And up through the open roof. There's the chimney. Here it peaks beyond. And the fireplace. Must have kept a lot of people warm and cold fall nights up here. And back to the doorway. More. Down mattress. Ceilings. Let's take a look at this. If we can read this. Do you know, Ed, if Dr. Wolff carved this?
No, he didn't. He didn't carve the inscription.
I don't know if we're going to be able to read the inscription.
Some unknown traveler did it.
Would you read the inscription? Because we probably can't read it here.
Okay, it says, Father, into thy eternal wisdom, all creative love and infinite power, direct my thoughts, give my devotion, and manifest my energy, that I may know, love, and serve thee.
But this is obviously part of the structure.
Yeah.
There's another view of the fireplace. Ashram, that's part of it. And we'll end here. We'll view out this window. Dr. Wolff and his students must have looked out many a time. That's basically a tour of the ashram. A state of disrepair, and it's illegal to fix it up. Although I noticed there's some fresh beams up here. Maybe somebody's sneaking in to keep it up. All right, here's a shot of the rear entrance to the ashram. This is actually the northwest corner. And we pan out here over this cliff, down into the valley, up, up, up. And you can see. I think I'll do that one again. As I said, here's the rear. This is the rear, actually northwest end of the ashram. And I'll start to pan down over the valley that it looks over. Way down there. Up. Those great majestic peaks. It was Harrison or Harris? Are we recording? Mm-hmm. Fine. Okay. This is a special, very special feature of the Here and Now video news service. I'm here with Diane Harrison and a very special man, Franklin Merrell-Wolff, who is a philosopher, a mystic, one of the great early pioneers in this country and in this century in consciousness investigation. I've got three of his most famous works here. The first is Pathways Through to Space. The second is The Philosophy of Consciousness Without an Object. And the third is Introceptualism. And these are books that you can get in a bookstore and a library and so forth. But we won't be covering the ground in those books. I'm going to ask Dr. Wolff what kinds of problems, what kinds of thoughts you've been dealing with in the last few years here. Where is this search, this investigation, this life's work taken you in the most recent phase?
Well, that is easily answered. I have been deeply concerned about the transition. The next step, when you reach the age that I have reached, is into the beyond. And according to the best authorities I know, including the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it is possible to make that transition consciously.
We are talking about what normally people refer to as death.
Yes, right, exactly, only I'm not using the word death. But that is what I'm referring to. It is viewing death not as termination, but as transition into a totally different domain, involving other adjustments, other perspectives, other possibilities, which we are told are related to the present life. Now, if you want to know what the item that most concerns me in these later days, when I'm almost 96, it is this transition, viewed not as termination, but as a movement into another way of consciousness that may prove to be very fascinating. It may prove to be depressing. It may prove to be many things that I cannot now foresee. But it is the center of my present interest. Now, I am also concerned about that which I have left here for this humanity. From way back, I determined on the search to ultimate realization, and with certain definite success. I have left a record of that in a set of 3 books and a large number of tapes, perhaps 500,000 words on them. And this is a record of one man's experience in a domain that is much more characteristic of Oriental interest than it is of Western. I have never been to the Orient. I had an opportunity once of getting employment there. I communicated with one of the brothers, and the advice was not to go.
Do you, in your turning over in your mind the upcoming transition, do you look to Oriental sources in terms of a preparation? Is there any kind of preparation that has to be made, or?
Yes, I do look to Oriental sources, to the best sources that I can find. And to the words of the brothers that are available to us here in the West on that subject. The Mahatma Letters is one of the best sources, if not the best, in that particular field. I look upon it more as a kind of an adventure than as something to be dreaded. But moods are complex. There are moments when I have felt dread for something that is so strange and new. In this life, I have not been practicing death. And so it is something of a strange adventure.
Well, now, most people would not characterize it that way. I think most people live in mortal fear of death. What is it?
I don't feel afraid of it. I feel that there are some elements that may be dreaded, but I'm much more excited by an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I feel about it. I have hopes of making the transition consciously. The best literature we have on the subject indicates that a conscious transition is possible. And that is what I intend to try for. In most cases, it is said to involve a swoon, with a becoming conscious later. Mm-hmm. But I hope to do it consciously. I had recent contact with a Tibetan Rinpoche, and he said that when I start on that journey, he'll come along and be a companion with me, for which I'm quite grateful. You may not know what a word in Rinpoche means.
No, I think most of us don't.
But it means a person of some ability, character, and familiarity with the deeper mysteries. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I look forward to it. Actually, I'm more intrigued by the thought of the transition than feeling dread. I won't deny that there is a dread of uncertainties, but it is not a major consideration. It is rather an adventure.
Mm-hmm. Well, now you had another great adventure in your life on August 7th, 1936,
Right.
in which you had a kind of illumination that's rarely experienced. Was there anything in that that helped to formulate your attitude towards the transition now?
Oh yes, definitely.
Could you describe a little of that?
Well, I had been reading in Paul Deusson's System of the Vedanta, the section dealing with liberation. I completed it. I was outdoors in the backyard of our house. I went over to a porch swing to meditate upon that which I had read. Then the thought came to me, there is nothing to be attained. And at that moment, I gave up the search. But also, at that moment, it was as though the heavens opened and a wealth of wisdom and understanding and delight descended beyond my capacity to assimilate. It was utterly glorious experience of most unexpected richness, filled with delight. I dwelt in it for a season, and then I found I could withdraw. And I did so. And I found that the body had been put under a severe strain, that there was a subtle fatigue through that body. The result was that when I entered the state again and I found I could do so at will, I did so at a lower level of intensity and repeated that reduction of intensity until the organism was no longer under the sense of strain when I came out from the state. But then I was disgusted because the state was so much reduced. Now it is said, I have been told this, that there are realizations known in India that cause death in 3 days. I can well believe it, for if I'd ever let myself go fully into the state with the knowledge of the strain it put upon the physical body, it might very well have resulted in death at that time. It'd been perfectly satisfactory with me so far as that was concerned. Only I felt that I had a work to do. So I held it down.
But death had lost its sting in that experience.
Oh, yes, goodness. I'd have welcomed it.
Uh-huh. So part of your attitude now towards the transition
He's colored by that.
Right.
It is colored by that. No. Basically, I don't dread it. There are parts of me that do. A while back, I had an experience of panic. I wondered why, and I had a chance to speak to one of the brothers about it. He said it was the reaction of the small lives of the physical body that were getting intimations of what was impending, and to them it was reason for panic, but not to the larger sentiments. Yeah. But mostly it's an adventure into a fascinating domain.
Do you expect in this adventure to re-enter the state of August 7th, 1936 to some degree or some way?
I'm not putting limits upon what may happen. I'm not guessing at what may happen. It may be similar, but what I think is more probable is that it'll be a dimension of experience as yet totally unknown.
Well, that is a great adventure. Diane, you've been with Dr. Wolff quite closely for some time now. Do you have any questions you want to ask him, or?
Oh, I don't think so. I just would prefer to just let him talk.
You're dodging.
His wisdom is worth hearing from the source. That's how I feel about it. So.
Well, now Diane's a kind of a student of yours.
Yes.
And what is it, maybe what are some of the things that you've been talking about that might be appropriate for a larger audience of students?
Well, I'll tell you.
On this quest.
I'll tell you of an experience in which Diane had a part. One thing I have noticed over the years, ever since 1936, is that when I was before an audience, the audience would often go into states, sometimes involving delight, very commonly involving an experience of heat, which we called psychophysical heat. People pulled off their coats. They'd get red in the face. And they had, to some extent, experiences of delight along with it, and were always interesting. This was totally new to any expectation on my part, but it happened so frequently that I became interested in it. It has always been spontaneous. I hadn't thought of anything of the kind happening, yet it happened. So once I asked myself, can I do this deliberately, with deliberate intent on a certain occasion to produce an induction, as we called it? So I had an audience, and I proceeded to do so, to give a statement purely extemporaneously with the intent of arousing an induction deliberately on that occasion. The effort was successful. We had many inductions. Now an induction I may have to describe. It is a mystic or mystic-like state in which one has an experience of the mystical delight in greater or lesser degree. Along with perhaps other contents of consciousness that would vary with the individual. In this case, I aimed at that deliberately from the beginning. It had always been spontaneous. This instance would have been deliberate. Well, it worked. I had the largest part of the whole audience in the, well, you might call it the mystic state. A state that is delightful and definitely of the mystical order. Now, I knew from experience, and also one of the other students, experienced persons who was present, knew that in that state an individual was totally unfit to drive an automobile. You're not objective enough. So I said, everyone who drives an automobile must come out of this state before you touch the car. And to know whether you come out, appear before a certain person and get her okay. Well, we found that several who were driving automobiles were in such a state. And it was not at all easy to induce them to come out of it. It was a little like taking candy away from a child.
They didn't want to come out.
They didn't want to in the least. We had to work at times with them. Well, I had a redoing. I had a record of that particular tape. I redid it here a little while ago. One person got an induction, and that was Diane. That meant that I had to give her attention, for here was a potential.
Now, this is interesting about the induction because your work has primarily been through the intellect and honing the intellect and through reason. But it would seem that induction is a process that's somehow a different channel. It goes more directly.
Yes, it's not primarily an ideation of content that you're concerned with. It's a state of consciousness, you see. A state in which you can detect elements of luminosity, of delight, of another order of awareness, not conceptual at all, that belongs, you would say in the strictest sense of the term, to the level of spiritual experience. Unless you are very skillful at formulation, you might have complete inability to describe it. It take a skill. Now there's a reason for that. You're dealing with a mode of consciousness that's different from our conceptual consciousness. But it is also different from our sensational consciousness. I invented a word for it and called it introceptual. And I may illustrate the problem of trying to communicate in forms of concepts this kind of material. You have the same problem and you try to describe a sensational experience. Your concept is a sign indicating an experience, and we're in the habit of using it. So, but if you're trying to describe that sensational experience you've had to an entity that never had such an experience, you'd be up against real difficulties. Mm-hmm. You would find it impossible, in point of fact. Now, when you're dealing with an introceptual content, you have the same problem. I worked a great deal upon the use of the concept to indicate some sort of understanding. But I know that that which I can give through a concept is not the immediate realization itself.
So each individual has to experience that for himself.
For himself, yes. And basically in community. Mm-hmm. With skill in the use of the concept in suggesting a different way of consciousness, you may be able to communicate something. But it isn't the reality as it is in itself. That you must know. Yet something can be communicated. I've worked on this problem a great deal. And in fact, in a way, it may be my chief contribution in being able to say something, because there is something said in my books and in my tapes bearing upon just this problem.
A great deal, and very well said. But I think just for most people, the idea of a different kind of state of consciousness that you described is so remote from their experience that they have trouble even believing it exists. So to have a witness, if you like, is very, very valuable.
Yes, well, that's true. For the witnesses, I refer you to the whole history of religion. Christian, Muslim, East Indian, whatever else there may be. It is this experience that is the foundation of the religious life. But you'll find that the real experiences upon which those reports are made are never clearly formulated in the way you can formulate ordinary subject matter.
By their nature?
By their very nature. You can speak to one who has had a similar experience to one you've had, yes, yourself, and he'll know what you're talking about, but not someone else. The effort to try to communicate to someone else is one that I have tried. I never cease trying, suggesting, but it calls for art, and it's never adequately done. There's only one way to know when you're dealing with that order of experience which really belongs to the field of religion, and that's to have the immediate experience yourself.
Okay, let me ask the question that is on everybody's mind is how do you get it? And I think that's the, at every level, short of having the experience, that's what, people are after.
Well, sometimes it comes out of the life. There are those individuals who have aspired towards goodness, towards the wishing of the very best for humanity. There may be the contact with those who have had such experience, and an event which I call induction can take place, that something similar is aroused in the seeker to that which is in the consciousness of the one to whom it comes. But ultimately, the experience is a relationship between yourself, deepest self, and that which you regard as the supreme value. The Christian would call it God. But the Muslim would have another name.
Allah.
Allah, yes. And so would the East Indians. The East Indians have gone further in this field than any others. But the Chinese have theirs, like Lao Tse. This is another order of experience, the most important that can possibly happen to a human being.
Do you think there's a historical perspective to this? Do you think it has a historical importance in terms of evolution or?
Well, there certainly has historical importance, because that is the history of religion, all of the sacred books of the world are a testimony with more or less wisdom, of experience of this sort, and also with a good deal of misinterpretation. As I know it, it is not an experience that brings a tramping of the life, a forcing it into forms that are imposed from the past. It is rather something that is born freshly, new, in your individual consciousness, representing that which you are to contribute to humanity. However, with another individual, it may take a different form and be just as valid. Therefore, there's no justification for religious war.
So underneath, in spite of the expression, the specific expression, it's essentially the same experience, but ever fresh with each person.
Yes, it is the same base. It may have a different message. Message may vary. I would be inclined to say it's inexhaustible. That is. You may quite rightly disagree with me on a given point. I wouldn't hold it against you.
Good. I don't disagree. But I don't have the same basis yet. But in terms of the experience for the individual is obviously transforming and very rich. But do you see any a broader point of view in terms of the evolution of mankind as a race, as a...
Oh yes, as a public, as a general influence, yes. In fact, the history of religion has shown that to be a fact. Oh yes, the hope of humanity lies in the awakening of the true religious sense, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean a repetition of one particular dogma. Let me emphasize that most emphatically. You have a many-sided truth, and dogmatic restriction has done untold damage to the religious purpose. I would say it has even made religion at times a curse instead of a blessing. It is a message of liberation, not of constriction as I know it.
So its potential is for the liberation of man as a whole, not just an individual...
Right, for man as a whole.
What about, would you speak a little about the idea of renouncing personal everlasting bliss and service in favor of service, the Buddhist idea and the one that you yourself, the road you yourself took?
Yes, I think it's valid. I'll have to bring another term in. That is nirvanic withdrawal. What becomes possible is a condition of nirvanic withdrawal into which one would no longer know any of the evil or suffering of this humanity, but one would know bliss, undying bliss, selfishly.
You once told me you called it a spiritual hedonism.
That's right. That is right. It is possible to renounce that experience for the purpose of rendering this value available to others as widely as possible. And therefore, one who could depart from the experiences of this world, which are bitter in many respects, may refuse to do so in order to render the release of humanity more possible, rather than his own private release. Yes, that's one thing that one can do. It's what I would recommend the sadhaka to do.
Okay, since we're a little different than most services, we get to look at the time here on camera. We are running a little long here, so let me ask you a final question, and let me conjure up for you someone who's just starting on this path, who has really all the confusions, just a glimmer of this as being possible. What are some first steps they might take? What some direction, some advice?
Well, I found the appropriate literature a great help. And there is such literature. I don't mean the dogmatics. I mean the more philosophic statements that you do run into. And such literature is available, and that I have found a big help to myself and I would recommend it. Of course, if you were fortunate enough to come under the influence of an Illuminati, that'd be an additional help.
That's a teacher, someone who has had the experience.
Right, right. An Illuminati is a teacher in the spiritual sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that'd be a help.
Are there any particular disciplines or practices?
Yes, I recommend the most honorable kind of life that you can live. In all human relationships. To cultivate the attitude that the end is the triumph of good. Not my good, but good as such.
I think that's a perfect ending. Thank you very much, Dr. Wolff. Thank you, Diane. Well, that's it. You can cut off the machine. If you just sit tight now for a minute.
What's the program? What do we?
Well, actually, it doesn't matter. I can't talk to you now. Why don't, Diana, you explain them what's going on here.
What they're doing right now, Dr. Wolff, is he's filming a close-up of Joel, so that Joel can use that part of the film in order to splice it in appropriate sequence in the videotape. And so all he's doing right now is just being filmed. And then they'll film a distance, and then they'll film a close-up. And
Well, you're not going to have me talk more,
Well,
or are you?
No,
this is
we're just taking extra shots to make sure we have enough casual shots to splice into the tape when he puts it all together.
This is technical stuff.
That's right.
technical stuff. That's right.
Okay.
But I guess we can talk about something.
Okay, that's good. That's good enough for me. Now, can you shut it off? Was it recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
How much does this whole setup cost?
I was just going to announce it. This has been recorded or taped at Lone Pine, California, at Dr. Wolff's ranch on June 21st, 1983. Let me try one other take. This is being taped at Lone Pine, California, on Dr. Wolff's ranch, June 21st, 1983. Recording here, yes. Dr. Wolff, why don't you tell Diane what you feel on your side when you feel this induction between you? What's your sensation of that? Do you know when it's coming?
Oh, no, I do not know that a person is receiving an induction until I hear the report from them that they give the induction. What I give is just in general out. Then there are those that receive from it, and there are others that do not.
But do you feel it? I mean, do you feel like a pleasurable experience in it? Do you feel the connection?
No, I wouldn't know of the induction till I hear a report after.
At all?
No.
Uh-huh.
No.
Huh. So, but when you said you set out to make one occur, so is it just a question of willing
that
it?
was very general.
Uh-huh. So it wasn't specific to...
Any particular individual, no. Just to anyone whatsoever. And I went through a general process for that. But how successful it was, I did not know until afterward.
Now, how important would you rate that in relation to other kinds of, reading and meditation You think it's a very effective...
I think it is a very effective agency. An individual who has real capacity of meditation would get the same benefit or more from his capacity. But most people don't have that capacity. So an induction is the best thing that can happen to them.
And it is very immediate, too. It has that advantage.
It's very what?
Immediate.
Yes, it's very immediate.
Okay, good. Now, John, I mean, is it a feeling or a physical sensation?
It's something pretty subtle. Well, how can you tell when a person is in a state of love?
I don't know.
All right. It's determined in the same way. It's like experiencing being in love, although it's a different subject matter altogether. You know it by that, essentially the same method. And I think you'd have difficulty trying to analyze how that is done.
That's an interesting analogy coming from you.
But it's true that you can tell.
Yeah.
You can tell.
Yes.
He's aware. But it is difficult to point to. I mean, when you were discussing it earlier, I was thinking to myself at the time that it really is indescribable. You can speak to it. You can speak to the edges of the experience, but you can't describe the experience
Not
itself.
the immediate experience any more than you can describe the state of being in love.
That's right.
And so I think that's the best analogy.
Sounds like a good one. I think I'll go.